Welcome to this week's episode of the Brownie Points podcast. This week, we're going to start off with our recap segment, which will be our big takeaway / key moments. Following that, we'll have our Brownie Points segment, which is the signature of the show. It's basically our award segment. We're going to give out 3 Brownie Points, 2 Brownie Points, and 1 Brownie Points to the standout players on offense, and then we'll do the same for our standout players on defense. Following that will be our storyline of the week segment. This week, the storyline of the week is are the Browns better off with Joe Flacco than they would have been with Deshaun Watson at QB. Finally, we're going to round out our episode with a look-ahead segment, Browns versus Texans. So, Levi, get us started with our big takeaway from this game.
So, our big takeaway is it's a throwback season. The throwback is the Cardiac Kids are back. So, obviously, the Browns being big in the 80s, the Cardiac Kids. And I don't mean they're playing it exactly like the Cardiac Kids. I just mean that your heart is going to react the same way. It was fun those first couple weeks, and Flacco was throwing all over the lot. I think this is going to be the more realistic offense moving forward. I mean, there will be games when the run game takes on a bigger role, but overall, you've seen with Flacco, the more he plays, the more he starts to, fade a bit and have his issues. I think you will see a little more of this, where there's big moments, but there's also moments when he falls flat. There's a lot of confusing things. He does seem to have a moment in every game where he does something that makes you scratch your head. It just seems to be what he does. That's the point he is at his career. He has some really beautiful plays too, so it's just a bit of a roller coaster. You just are not necessarily sure what to expect on a full game basis. It is going to be a little more of that. The defense is going to have to be there, showing up, playing well, and that's going to be extremely important moving forward. We had fun for a couple of weeks, but I don't expect Joe Flacco to go back to that. I think it's going to be more of this. I expect more closer to this kind of offensive production, perhaps a little better, but don't expect that there's going to be the defense showing up and the offense is a solid machine putting up, 25 plus points. Just probably not going to be the reality. It's going to get gritty, and gritty's different than maybe we were hoping. But at the end of the day, the Browns are 9-5, and that's something they haven't been in quite a while. So you know what? It didn't go as we expected, but we're finding ways to win games. And we won a game that every other year I can remember we would have lost. And we won. So it's working. Sometimes it's better to be lucky than good. There's an expression like that. And to be fair, but they're also putting in the work. It's not pure luck, but it's definitely there. So look, these are going to be a lot of heart attack roller coaster games. The good news on that front is that Joe Flacco does appear not to. He's Joe Cool. He doesn't worry. When it's that big moment, it's not that he'll shy away from it. And that's what we mentioned before is the advantage to having a veteran QB who's done big things as a starter before, as opposed to a bridge guy who hasn't really been tested before. You might get the same make it the same level of quality most weeks, but the difference is he won't shy away in the big moment. So that's the good part of that.
Yeah, absolutely. For me, my big takeaway, it's kind of a similar note, is that the Browns kind of have an explosive offense now. And that goes for both ways. Sometimes that explosion is a 50-yard pass to Marquise Goodwin, a 50-yard pass to Amari Cooper, and sometimes it's an interception in our own 20-yard line and leading to points the other way. But it's explosive. Joe Flacco has a big arm. He's played 3 games now for the Browns. He's thrown for 254 yards, then like 320 something, and then 370. That's not something we're used to seeing from Browns quarterbacks. That's not something that Deshaun Watson was doing. Joe Flacco and his arm strength and his ability to anticipate throws has also created some plays that simply wouldn't have existed for any other quarterback on our roster that Joe Flacco was able to make. But overall, the team is more explosive, I think, than they ever have been all season, in my personal opinion. I think as far as like the quarterback's ability to run, obviously Deshaun Watson would haven't beaten that category. But as far as pure pocket passing, this passing attack is more dynamic and more explosive than they've ever have been this year, at least. And that's pretty cool. That's pretty nice. When you were coming into that game and the Browns needed a big play, you didn't feel like it was impossible. I'm not saying you knew it was going to happen. It's not like Patrick Mahomes where guys like that, you almost feel like 2 minutes left in the game to get the ball. You almost feel like it's done. Like, okay, it's over. We lost. For Joe Flacco, you don't feel that, but you didn't feel like it was impossible, which is a feeling we usually have with a guy at quarterback. We're usually like, all right, let's see what happens. Hopefully we can get it, but you're not really expecting anything. But from this, you had some hope, and it showed through. And Joe Flacco did show his veteran presence and his ability to stay calm. He's playing like Joe Flacco in the fourth quarter just like he played like Joe Flacco in the first quarter, I think. The plays the kind of throws that you were making were very similar throws. They just were more successful in the fourth quarter, I think. But we're going to get into Joe Flacco a little bit more specifically later. But this game was pretty close. The Browns won it at the end. Cardiac kids, maybe, who knows? But what's your big take? Not your big takeaway, I'm sorry. What's your key moment from that game?
I think the biggest moment, there's a lot of things you could talk about. And there were moments that were bad that made you think maybe that will be the key moment. I will say that when he threw that interception, Joe Flacco, off of the muff punt, I did think that might be the killer moment for this Browns team. And in the future, that's unacceptable. It's one thing if you don't get a touchdown, which is bad enough on that kind of gift. But to throw an interception, that is the kind of play that you cannot have if you're going to win these tough games down the stretch. Good teams going to the playoffs. When you get a gift, you certainly can't turn around and gift it right back. Unacceptable. But ultimately, the big moments for me come down to two plays. I mean, there's the obvious I'll cover first, which was the Njoku catch. Like, obviously, he catches it, brings it down to field goal range. That's obviously phenomenal and extremely important. And it was the play that set up the winning field goal and all that. But I would say that the biggest moment to me was the pass to Goodwin. The offense just hadn't been doing much. And then late in the game, all of a sudden, you get that explosion, that huge pass. Joe Flacco, it's like, oh, okay, wait. Joe Flacco is back. It's not completely gone. And he throws a beautiful pass. Way downfield. Huge play. And suddenly it's like, okay, yeah, we didn't get a touchdown on that play, on that drive. But it was like, okay, we scored, and also this isn't over yet. There is still offense today left. There's still juice left in that arm. There's still a play left. This offense can still make plays. It's not always about scoring the touchdown on the drive. It's that the longer you wait, the more the momentum fades. Yep. So for him to go out there and make that big play, it kind of just put some life back in the Browns. And immediately the Browns defense started playing better too. All of a sudden, not that they were playing terribly, but they were definitely giving up some yardage and first downs. All of a sudden they just locked down on the Bears, and you could just sense the energy shift after that play. So that would be the biggest game-changing moment of the game.
Yeah, for me, my big key moment. I keep saying big takeaway for everything. I'm just like, my big takeaway. The key moment from that game, I think, was pretty clearly was that big throw to Amari Cooper. Like, you're talking more emotionally, I think in a more intelligent way of looking at it. There's the obvious play, and then there's I'm being a little bit over an analyst here. This was actually a bigger play than you think. You gave I think the more analyst take, going a little bit deeper than the most obvious thing. I'm going to say the most obvious thing. That Joe Flacco pass to Amari Cooper that went for 50 yards, that tight window throw that he made, that was the key moment from that game, obviously, right? That gave the Browns, what they needed. And that throw was a microcosm of the Joe Flacco experience. And that's specifically why I also want to talk about it. Joe Flacco, what separates him from the Browns quarterbacks that we've had, and we've talked about this in the past, is Joe Flacco's ability, not really his ability to make the tight window throws, it's his willingness to, throw those balls, but also his anticipation. Joe Flacco, I'm going to throw this up on the screen. Hopefully I can get that up there for you, where the ball's out of Joe Flacco's hands, and Amari Cooper still hasn't made his cut, and the ball's out of Joe's hands. Deshaun Watson, I dare say, I don't believe has ever done that. Not to my recollection. Has he thrown the ball, and Joe's throwing that ball, lasers it right into that window before Amari Cooper even makes the cut, because Joe knows where he's going to be. Now, a quarterback who makes those kinds of throws sometimes looks really, really, really stupid, because when you throw into a window before the receiver's there, if there's a miscommunication, if there's a misunderstanding and the receiver doesn't get to his spot, now it looks like you just threw the ball either A, into nowhere, or B, directly into a defender. And it almost looks like you're throwing the pick on purpose. Like you threw it, like we had a couple interceptions this year, where it's like, wow, it looks like he mixed up who was on his team because he throws it directly to them. And it's not because he didn't see them. It's because he's trying to anticipate. It's because he's expecting the receiver to get in front of that defender. And then there's a miscommunication. The receiver doesn't get there, or Joe Flacco on his end could be a miscommunication. But that's what he's been doing. That's the kind of quarterback that he is. And that's the element, that different element that he brings to this Browns team that we haven't had in the past. And that, though, is a microcosm of that. At the beginning of the game, in this one earlier on, when we threw that pick, where it was about 20 yards or something, that allowed the Bears to score, turned into a pick that came down the other way. This time, Cooper gets to the spot, catches the ball, we end up getting the touchdown, and that's obviously the play that basically wins us the game. But that was kind of a microcosm of the Joe Flacco experience, and that was really, I think, a key moment in understanding what this offense looks like and what Joe Flacco tries to do as a quarterback. and it was also the key moment in that game as a whole. But I think we're going to wrap up our key moments segment there. That's our recapping. Now let's head into our award segment, which is our Brownie Points segment. Once again, we're going to give out 3 Brownie Points, 2 Brownie Points, and 1 Brownie Point to the standout players on offense, and then we're going to do the same for the standout players on defense. Sometimes we don't give out Brownie Points to 3, sometimes we don't give it at 2, but we're going to do our best, and we always give it to the players that are deserving. If nobody's deserving, nobody gets it. We're not going to give them out just because we have a segment named after it. Levi, let's talk about our offensive Brownie Points first. Who do you got at 3, 2, and 1 Brownie Points for this Browns game?
Well, at 3 Brownie Points, I have David Njoku. He had a really good game.
Incredible.
Really good game, and did not have the boneheaded mistakes, which was really nice. And I love it because Njoku has like 2 plays. He has a play where he breaks out big and he gallops along and then inevitably leaps at the end. And then he has play of in the middle for like 5 yards. He gets it and then shuffles his feet and falls into 2 defenders and gets like 8 yards. But hey, they're 2 plays that work. But hey, he had an amazing touchdown grab. Really good. Great concentration. And what I love about that is it's a play that required great athleticism, but also great concentration. That when it came in, he had to concentrate to get his feet down and make sure that the catch counted. That's really good to see because he's always been an athlete, but he's also, again, had those boneheaded errors. So it's really good to see him be able to marry the two, to marry the ability to make that athletic play, but then also have the concentration to get your feet down so it's a touchdown first. That was awesome. And I mean, he had 100 yards. He was phenomenal. He was great. He was explosive. He's the Njoku we've been waiting for. It's definitely been his best year overall. He's had those mistakes. He kind of reminds me of the Mike Evans of tight ends. You know, he's a guy who makes a lot of big plays and you love him, but occasionally he makes you just hit your head on the table and just some bizarre drops. But at the same time, he is really explosive and he's really good player. And he showed it today. So absolutely 3 Brownie Points for him. Moving on to 2, I'm going to go back to Amari Cooper. Mr. Steady, he wasn't all over the field like he has been in some of the games earlier, but he was still really good. He caught 7 for 77. He still had big plays when it mattered. Yeah. Several big plays when it mattered, including that catch. And don't get me wrong, Joe Flacco threw a laser. That's his best throw. That's the best throw I've seen from a Browns quarterback since 2020.
Oh, yeah. That was an incredible throw.
Incredible throw. Honestly, yeah, since 2020, maybe even before that. But individual throw was phenomenal. But also, like, on those plays, it does require a certain amount of concentration when that ball's coming right in that window and you got defenders all over you. Cooper played great. Like, when it mattered, he made some really big plays. Being Cooper, doing the right thing for us. That was awesome. He gets 2 Brownie Points. And lastly, at 1 Brownie Point, I will go with Joe Flacco. He would, he made really big clutch plays. And so that gives him that moment because he made those big plays, and they were big plays. He didn't just play within himself. He made some huge throws. So he deserves credit for that. But he gets 1 and barely 1 because he also made a ton of mistakes. The Browns defense shut down the Bears. They got 2 touchdowns because they got an interception for a touchdown and an interception that brought him to the 2-yard line. So that was 2 touchdowns. So he's like the Tony Stark over here. Like, he creates as many problems as he's solving. But at the end of the day, when they need him the most, he made big plays. And that's why he's Tony Stark and not just some guy you get rid of as soon as you can. And that's why he's still Joe Flacco. He still gets a Brownie Point because he did come through when it mattered. What about you?
Yeah, absolutely. I have 0 disagreements there. I'm going to run through mine. But David Njoku also at 3 Brownie Points. He had 10 grabs today, over 100 yards, and a touchdown. Another great game from him. We've been talking about very consistently, but often, like you said, it's been a mixed bag. He'll have this great game and then a couple bonehead plays or a drop that's just so frustrating. He had none of that today. 10 catches. He was pretty consistent. He was there throughout the game. Excellent performance from David Njoku. At 2 Brownie Points, I also have Amari Cooper. He had, to run his stats, he had 4 catches, 109 yards, and a touchdown. Also another good game.
I messed up the stat on that.
Well, what did you say?
I said 7 for 77.
Oh, well, that's fine. Don't worry. 4 for 109 yards. And at 1 Brownie Point, we got Joe Flacco. Also, Joe Flacco was the reason we won, and Joe Flacco was also the only reason it was close in the first place. The Bears' offense wasn't doing anything the entire game, pretty much. The defense was shutting them down entirely. Like, the Bears could barely move. The only reason the Bears scored any points was because Joe Flacco put them in a position where they could barely do anything but score. Basically handed it to them. So Joe Flacco's the reason it was close. Joe Flacco's also the reason we won. Like you said, kind of a bit of a Tony Stark situation there with him. But at the end of the day, we won, so I'm going to give him his props. I'm going to give him his 1 Brownie Point. Moving on to our defense, because the defense really was good today. Who do you want to give your Brownie Points to on defense?
Well, so first of all, it was definitely a team effort. I think it was a team effort defensive kind of day. It wasn't really one of those dominant one or two guys. I did feel like it was a team effort, but there were outstanding performers. So without further ado, I'll throw some honorable mentions. JOK, 6 tackles and a sack. There's an honorable mention. Myles Garrett got held a lot, so he still was making some ruckus, and he's your favorite player, so I'll leave you to deal with all that. You can take it to the refs. But he did have some plays, so it's not like I did not mention it. But going right into the brownie points, 3 brownie points, I'm going to give it to Denzel Ward. He comes back, immediately has an impact. DJ Moore didn't have a huge impact on the game. Caught 52 yards. Wasn't a real explosive 52 yards. It was mostly non-factor. Didn't do a whole lot. So that was good. And, DJ Moore's a really good receiver. And he's had some good games out there with Chicago. So that was big that he could come back and immediately right off the injury list, come in there and slow down DJ Moore, make sure he wasn't a huge factor in the game. That was a huge part of, again, why they gave up so little points. When you consider those interceptions, is really impressive what the Browns defense did. So huge props to Denzel Ward. Moving on to 2 brownie points, I'm actually going to go with Dalvin Tomlinson. And so the reason why I'm just going to mention why I'm not giving Newsome, it's close because he had some good plays, but he also got really lucky where a Bears receiver dropped a wide open pass that he got burned on. That was like a 50-yard pass that could have been detrimental to this whole game. And so he edges out of it. Moving on again, Dalvin Tomlinson's too. He had some real wreckage. He was kind of all over the field. He had a sack. He created a lot of, give you that defensive, that pressure from the interior. And he looked good. And again, it felt like more of a team effort on the pressure standpoint, but I'm going to sing out Dalvin to stand for that. Mm-hmm. And then lastly, I'm going to go with Ronnie Hickman at 1 brownie point. And Ronnie Hickman, undrafted free agent from Ohio State, hometown boy. I'm honestly surprised people haven't talked about him a little more. But Ronnie Hickman actually played really well, and he had a lot of big moments, and when it mattered, he was in the right spot. And what a big play for him. What a big game for him. For a guy who's an undrafted free agent, a couple big games means you might actually have 3 to 5 years in the NFL. You could set up your whole life off of that. What a big moment, and he steps up and plays really well.
Especially with Grant Delpit being out.
Yeah.
This is go time.
Yeah, this is it. And he's getting his opportunity that a lot of guys who are undrafted never get. And he's showing up, and you love to see it. So, I would have loved if that was Austin Watkins' story, but Ronnie Hickman, he showed up and showed out and definitely deserves a brownie point for his play. Who do you got?
For me, I'm not as harsh on Greg Newsome over that play. There's 2 reasons for that. One is because going back a little bit, right on that play, before Justin Fields threw that ball, it is of my opinion that Myles Garrett was being, I believe it was Myles Garrett, somebody, I don't remember who it was one of the most egregious holds of the last few weeks. Justin Fields should have never gotten that ball off in the first place, and Greg Newsome should have been covered. That being said, obviously he still blew the coverage, but Greg Newsome also made enough big plays, big standout plays, covering his guy, making tackles. I'm still going to give him credit and get him to 3 brownie points for me. At 2 brownie points, I'm going to give it to Dalvin Tomlinson. I think he was pretty consistent throughout the game, getting pressure, run stopping. He had a sack as well, I believe. At 1 brownie point, I'm also going to give a shout out to Ronnie Hickman. He really played pretty well. And without Grant Delpit, I was really nervous about what's going to happen in the secondary. And I was thinking about coming into this game. We predicted a Browns win, but as the week was going and as we were leading up to the game, we kept hearing about another injury, another guy's out. And I started to really wonder, does this defense have enough depth? There's only so much depth you can have, right? Even the great teams. You can sustain a guy out. You can sustain another guy. There comes a point where eventually it's too much to overcome. The Browns have not hit that point yet, clearly. Somehow, I don't know. Despite 25% of their payroll, I think, being on the sidelines, which is crazy. But they've managed to overcome it. It's because of coaching and also because of guys like Ronnie Hickman taking a step up, and Andrew Berry deserves some credit for that. And Jim Schwartz deserves credit for that, and Kevin Stefanski deserves credit for that. The Browns have... This kind of thing isn't something you usually see from the Browns. This is the kind of thing you usually see from teams like the Patriots. From those types of organizations. Obviously, when Tom Brady was there. But from those types of organizations where guys being out isn't as big of a deal because they have such good coaching and their system is so strong. The Browns this year, obviously not a juggernaut, but they've been incredible at replacing guys and coming in and still being productive. And Ronnie Hickman has continued that. And he's going to continue to play probably for the rest of the season because Grant Delpit's out for the year. So he's probably going to be at that starting safety spot. So hopefully he can keep this up. And it was a great performance from him. Really excited to see it. All right, so let's move on to our storyline of the week segment. We got a little drama here because We had Deshaun Watson. Deshaun Watson's out. We had 4 quarterbacks this year. We all know that. But things are clicking. Joe Flacco's had a lot of yards. His picks have been a bit of an issue, but he's been pretty dynamic. He's thrown for a lot of yards. Again, I think 254 something, 300, 374 yards. He's had good games. And the question is arising. Are the Browns better off right this season? I'm not saying 3 years from now, but this season in a vacuum. Are the Browns better off with Joe Flacco than they would have been if Deshaun Watson was playing?
Yeah, so I'm glad you brought up the whole moving forward for a bit, because let's just cover that for a minute. Absolutely not, because he is older, and there are some people that are like, oh, yeah, like Joe Flacco, we should just sign him. And okay, let's slow down just a little bit, okay? He is about to be 39, okay? Let's slow down a little bit. And look, you saw a little bit of that downside. We did mention that Joe Flacco's been a guy that the longer he's played, the more he comes down to earth a bit. So not overall surprising, but overall, if I'm going to have to give an answer on this season, I do think Joe Flacco is the better answer. I think Watson, again, he has real trouble with his anticipatory throws. He always had a good running game when he was playing. He never had some of these games where he had trouble with the run game like we've had recently. Some games are like that. And he's never had that and still had a lot of trouble in most of his games. I do think you need those anticipatory throws, like I mentioned before. Sooner or later, you have to make them. Joe Flacco is able to make them. Joe Flacco seems to understand the system better, and he seems to be better able to make those big plays when you need them. Admittedly, he's definitely had his downside, but Deshaun Watson didn't really play mistake-free this year either.
Yeah, like I said, Deshaun Watson also had his downsides.
So I don't want to feel that, and the fact that Flacco's been able to connect with more receivers is extremely important. Mm-hmm. But yes, of course, you're using Cooper and Njoku, of course. But Tillman's making more of an impact. Elijah Moore, this week not as much, but other weeks he's made big play. And this week he had one big play, but other weeks he's made multiple plays. And Cedric Tillman making multiple plays. All of a sudden he's making plays. So
4 catches for Tillman.
Yeah, David Bell had a big touchdown catch. It's not that he's all the time, but every once in a while you can get those other contributors in different games. That really helps, because sometimes if you just have one guy, they're just going to double cover him. You need to be able to hit other people in those moments. And Joe Flacco being able to do that allows us to stay dangerous throughout the game. And like even if Mark Cooper's out, or he's just not having his best game, or he's just, he's having a medium game, but the defenders are having a great game and there's double teaming him, you need to be able to reach multiple people. And Flacco's able to do that. He's able to read defenses. He's clearly a better fit for the Stefanski offense. So at this moment, I would have to say Joe Flacco. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think it's crazy to say. It feels crazy to say. But when you look at this from an honest standpoint, I think you have to say that Joe Flacco is the better option for the Browns this year specifically. Yes, because it's possible that next year Deshaun Watson will have finally been back long enough and he would have finally been integrated into the offense and it'd be that Deshaun Watson. But I think this decision is genuinely only feels controversial and feels crazy because of Deshaun Watson's name. Going off of this year, the floor of Deshaun Watson versus the floor of Joe Flacco, Deshaun Watson's been way lower. Deshaun Watson's floor has been awful. His floor has been looking like a backup. Joe Flacco's floor has been looking like an okay bridge quarterback, like a low-tier bridge quarterback. But Joe Flacco's high has also been higher, I think, than Deshaun Watson's high for over the course of the game. Deshaun Watson's had halves where he was like really, really good. But I think over the course of the game, I think it's also arguable that Joe Flacco's had better highs as a whole, like has better high games, because they've both had games where they played really well, like a high completion percentage, threw for a good amount of yards. But they've also both had those interceptions. So I think, yes, Joe Flacco's had those interceptions and those downsides in his games where he was really good. But so did Deshaun Watson. So I think when you look at it, Joe Flacco's got a higher floor this year, higher floor, better ceiling. The offense is definitively, statistically, the eye test, more dynamic. And as you said, it's more spread out. There's more players involved. Cedric Tillman's had 4 grabs this week. That's not exactly a Herculean effort, but that's practically as much as he had in the 6 games before, or however many games it was, I forget. Sorry, off the top of my head. And however many games it was before Joe Flacco stepped in. In the games where Deshaun Watson played, Cedric Tillman had, 1 catch, maybe? 2 catches? And Cedric Tillman had 4 this week. I think he had 4 last week. He's actually a part of the offense. He's not a big part of the offense, but he's a part of the offense. And that's not something we saw before. And he's a rookie. There's only so much we're going to get from him. And Cedric Tillman's actually looked pretty decent. I think that Joe Flacco has done a better job with that. And another thing, as you touched on, is anticipating throws. That's something that Deshaun Watson simply wasn't doing, which I think is partly why we have this upside that Joe Flacco has that Deshaun Watson hasn't shown this year, is because for Deshaun Watson, the play needs to already be drawn up in there, and the player's open, and then he'll make the throw. But Joe Flacco, he'll have plays like Deshaun Watson in that play, that key moment from the game, that changed everything to Amari Cooper. Deshaun Watson doesn't make that throw. And I don't think that's controversial to say. Deshaun Watson does not make that throw. He simply doesn't do it. He doesn't have that kind of anticipation, and I think that kind of veteran presence to make that throw. Potentially, he doesn't have the arm strength either, because Joe Flacco had to put a lot of zip on that ball. If that ball hung a little bit more, it would have been picked off. And that was a pretty deep ball. Now, it was a pretty deep ball. It was also pretty deep ball. I don't think that's a throw Deshaun Watson makes. And I think with the kind of defense that the Browns have, having that upside, that dynamism where we could have a 50-yard play, we could have a game where we have multiple plays over 40 yards, that is so valuable for this team. And last week, I said, I think after this game, my prediction was, and I think I predicted like 28-10, which didn't exactly happen, but I predict that after this game, we're going to start talking about the Browns as potentially being able to win a playoff game. And I think that turned out to be true. I think after you saw that performance from Joe Flacco, I think you do feel like there's a chance they could win a playoff game. It's not out of the question. They do have a chance to not just make the playoffs, but actually make a splash in the playoffs. But yeah, that's my thoughts on it. Feel free to let us know. If you're listening on Spotify, obviously you can't let us know, but if there's on YouTube, feel free to comment, tell us what you think, or give us a follow on Twitter. But yeah, I think the Browns are better off with Joe Flacco. Let's look ahead next week. The Browns game, playing the Texans, really intriguing matchup against the Texans. I'm going to let you get into that first. What do you think we can expect from this game?
Well, talking about the playoffs, it's just really interesting to transition to our game against the Texans, because who knows, that might be our matchup for all we know. The South is up for grabs, and it seems likely, and we don't know for sure, but it seems likely where the Browns could finish with the number one wild card seed and play the winner of the AFC South division. And could win. It could be playing the winner of the AFC South division. So we'll see. This is a big game. Playing the Texans. C.J. Stroud should be back. C.J. Stroud obviously being a very dynamic quarterback, having a lot of great games this year. However, Tank Dell is out. That is the number one receiver. I will also say that I feel that the Browns' struggles of defense on the road has been a little overestimated because Denzel Ward was out. I think if Denzel Ward is in, it's different. I will admit, I think some of the pass rush hasn't been as good on the road, but with Denzel Ward, the coverage is so good. Whereas when we play on the road, and you get into these issues where Ward was out for several of those games, and then whenever Emerson was lined up with a fast receiver, we were in trouble. With Ward healthy, and it seems he would be healthy next week, he hasn't been injured, so assuming he's healthy for this game and stays healthy, and without Tank Dell, it's just going to be hard to throw the ball. Now, they have a run game, don't get me wrong. Devin Singletary has been playing really well for him. So don't count that out, but you can put a little focus in on that run game when you have those kind of corners and Tank Dell is out. You don't have that number one option coming at you. It just seems on a talent level, you really have the talent to add up. You got to watch out for C.J. Stroud. You don't know what he's going to do. He's a guy with that kind of talent, which you can never underestimate. But on paper, it lines up that the defense should give him so much problems that we should be okay. Now, on the Brown side, we've had some struggles on the O-line recently from the offensive side, and you do have to watch out. This Texans D-line is playing really, really, really well lately. They've gotten an infusion late in the season in the interior from a man named Khalil Davis from the USFL, my favorite league in the world. But yes, he's been actually playing really well. And they played really well last week. They are causing havoc. So the Browns, look, they've done a really good job of adjusting this year. Adjusted really well, actually, this past game to the pass rush. They're going to have to do that again. Be aware that the pass rush will get through a fair amount of the time. So you need to have a game plan how to deal with that, because they're going to cause some problems. And so you're going to be able to deal with that to get things open, maybe get some more screenplays for Ford, try to get the defense moving side to side a little bit, and still make use of a guy like Ford, who is really talented and can do a lot for you, as we've seen, and a little quiet lately. So let's get him involved. But the talent is there. Overall, again, if Tank Dell was in, I'm not so sure where to put this, especially if he was in and Ward was out. But with Ward being in and Tank Dell being out, even though the Texans are hungry and we're on the road, I think the Browns, our team this year, has proven that they're finding ways to win. And in a big moment with that kind of on-paper advantage, they do. I think it is close. I'm going to say the final is 24-17. Browns win.
Okay, and not that far off from mine. Before I get into that, well, not before, but just like before I give my actual score prediction. So a couple things I want to talk about here. So the Texans are the 27th ranked passing defense, and the Browns have been passing pretty well recently as far as yards allowed. So the Texans give up a lot of passing yards. Joe Flacco throws for a lot of passing yards. Here's those picks. I know. but he throws for a lot of passing yards. The Texans give up a lot of passing yards. So that would indicate the offense should be able to move. Second point, the Texans are actually 7th on run defense, which kind of surprised me. But the Browns' run game has been stuttering a little bit as of late. They've still been pretty good in like short yard situations, not this game, but overall, even the games where they weren't running so well, they were still pretty good in short run situations where they really needed it. But the run game has been stuttering a little. I'm not sure exactly what's going on there. The numbers would indicate this isn't the game that it's going to come back. Hopefully we can, at least to some degree, like get 80 yards out of our guy, 90 yards, something like that. Maybe it won't be an explosive game, but get something more consistently we would like to see, because Joe Flacco was throwing a lot in this last game. But another thing is the Texans are the 2nd in passing yards. So, I mean, that's really C.J Stroud, but the Texans are 2nd in the league in passing yards. The Browns are the number 1 defense as far as passing yards allowed. So you got a number 1 offense, number 2 defense matching up. Who's going to win? A movable object meets a unstoppable force, that kind of thing, whatever it's called. I don't remember exactly.
Yeah, that's right. Unstoppable force meets a movable object.
Yeah, okay, great. Wow, look at me. Right off the top of my head. So you think it's going to look like something like that, but the Texans played the Jets a couple weeks ago. The Jets are another number 3 ranked team, and the Jets destroyed them 30-6. The Texans couldn't do anything. And yes, Tank Dell was out, but Tank Dell's going to be out this game too. So it's pretty 1-1, right? Jets are at number 3, Browns are number 1. The Texans have shown that they can be shut down by a good defense, by a good pass defense. The Browns are a very good pass defense. I see them continuing that. I see them shutting down the Texans for the most part. I'm not saying they score 4 points, but I see them doing a really good job against them. And I see this game finishing. I think Joe Flacco is going to be able to move. I think the defense is going to be able to get it done, do what they need to do. The Texans might get some garbage time points, but I see the Browns winning this game 27-17.
Yeah, I think it's definitely within range. The only thing we got to watch out for the Browns is they do have a pretty good run game. Singletary and Dameon Pierce. And the Browns on the road have struggled with the run a little bit. With the Broncos game, we really saw that. The only advantage, again, is that without the receiving game that the Broncos have and what they were doing in the pass game, I think they can overcompensate a little bit. So that's why I think they'll make it work.
Yeah, I mean, that's something you got to look out for. But I think the Browns will continue to roll this game. They're not going to clinch a playoff spot, but they're going to essentially clinch it, I think, after this game. All but clinch it, I guess I should say. But, yeah, I think we're going to...
But then again, you definitely want to play for that number 1 playoff seed, because that's the difference between playing, a team like the Jaguars or maybe the Colts or something like that, or alternatively playing a team like the Chiefs. Seriously, the Chiefs are the 3 seed right now.
Right.
So in Arrowhead. So definitely important, not just to clinch a playoff spot, but to get that top wild card spot.
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to see the Browns fighting for it, I think, every game and right up until
the last game is the Bengals.
Yeah, that's going to be really interesting. And they have that time. If you look at the schedule, it says TBD, to be determined. I think the NFL circled that game. It's like, we'll see what happens at the end of the season, but I think they're suspecting that game could be pretty significant for both teams, or at least one of those teams as far as playoff implications go, or playoff seeding. But yeah, we're going to wrap up our episode here. Thank you for listening to the Brownie Points.
I just want to add a note for the program next week. Next week is a Christmas episode, and due to family situations, my brother Noam is just going to be out, so we're going to get an abridged episode following the game, just me putting out a quick episode for you, and we're going to try to get a more extended episode later in the week for you on like Wednesday or Thursday as soon as possible. So we're going to see you next week, and Merry Christmas, everybody.